All right, so get this. Picture World War II. A body washes up in Spain, and it's carrying top-secret invasion plans.
Yeah.
But here's the twist. The whole thing's a fake.
Oh, it's classic Operation Mincemeat, one of the most incredible deceptions in history. Like, we're talking tricking Hitler and changing the course of the war stuff.
And you've brought a ton of sources, declassified documents, personal accounts, historical analysis. So how did this crazy plan actually work? Where do we even start?
Well, I think it all goes back to 1939, this thing called the Trout memo.
Trout memo. Kind of fishy. What is that?
Okay, officially it's by Rear Admiral John Godfrey, but lots of folks think it was really his assistant's idea, Ian Fleming, and yeah, we're talking the Ian Fleming that created James Bond.
No way. So 007 is based on real spy stuff. This is already blowing my mind.
You bet. And buried in this memo with 54 other ideas is suggestion, #28, planting fake papers on a corpse to mislead the enemy.
Whoa, hold up. They were thinking about using a dead body years before Operation Mincemeat even happened. That's wild.
Right. But there's a real incident in 1942 that really solidified the idea. A British courier's plane crashes off the coast of Spain. They recover the body, and his secret documents are unopened. Turns out the Spanish authorities are probably sharing intel with the Germans, even though they're supposed to be neutral.
Ah, so they knew Spain was the weak link, a place where they could slip in this fake intel.
Exactly. And that's where Charles Cholmondeley and Ewen Montagu come in, two intelligence officers with the task of making this deception a reality.
Okay, Trout memo, inspiration, a real-world incident, and two brilliant minds. What's next?
Well, they needed a body, and not just anybody, one that would look like it died in a plane crash at sea.
Yeah, makes sense. It had to be convincing. So were there, specific requirements?
They went to Sir Bernard Spilsbury, a top pathologist at the time, and he suggested death by drowning, injuries, shock, or exposure would all be plausible, and most importantly, difficult for a Spanish doctor to fully investigate.
So they were thinking several steps ahead. Even the cause of death was part of the plan. What happened next?
They had to find the right person, someone homeless, unclaimed, recently deceased. And records officially point to Glyndwr Michael, a Welshman who died from rat poison. But some folks think it might have been a sailor from the sunken HMS Dasher.
Ooh, a mystery. Is this how Major William Martin is born, their fake identity?
That's right. They had to create an entire persona, a whole backstory, like something out of a spy novel.
This is where it gets really cool. They gave him a rank, a whole history.
His rank, acting major, was chosen carefully. Important enough to be carrying sensitive documents, but not so high profile that he'd be instantly recognized.
Smart. And tell me about the pocket litter. This is my favorite part.
Yeah, this is where it gets good. They planted fake documents, personal effects, to make Major Martin seem real love letters from a fictional fiancée named Pam. An overdraft notice, a receipt for an engagement ring, theater ticket, stubs the works.
I remember reading they even included a photo of Pam.
They did. It was a picture of an MI5 clerk named Jean Leslie. They even went as far as having someone wear Major Martin's uniform and underwear to make them look worn. Montagu himself spent weeks rubbing the ID cards on his trousers to make them look used.
That is insane attention to detail. It's like a movie, but with real-world consequences.
Speaking of movies, there's some debate about who actually wrote those love letters. Some say it was Hester Leggett, like in the film. Others think Patty Bennett. But let's move on to the heart of the operation, the deception documents themselves.
Okay, so what were these top-secret papers? How are they supposed to fool the Germans?
Montagu had three main criteria for the documents. First, the real target of the deception had to be mentioned casually. Then Sicily had to be named to throw the Germans off. And lastly, the documents had to seem unofficial, something you wouldn't send through secure channels.
Right. It had to look like an accidental find, not a deliberate plant. Makes sense.
The main document was a letter from Lieutenant General Sir Archibald Nye to General Sir Harold Alexander, who was the commander in North Africa.
And what did it say?
Well, it mentioned Operation Husky, the real Allied plan to invade Sicily, but it made it seem like a diversion. According to the letter, the main targets were Greece and Sardinia.
So they flipped the real targets. Did they use any other fake code names?
Oh, yeah. They used Operation Brimstone for the attack on Sardinia, just to add another layer of confusion. And get this, they even included mundane details, like awarding Purple Hearts to British soldiers to make it seem more authentic.
Brilliant. They thought of everything. What else is in the briefcase?
Another letter, this time from Lord Louis Mountbatten to Admiral Cunningham, introducing Major Martin as an amphibious warfare expert.
That's why they chose a Royal Marine. It all ties together. How did they make sure the Germans actually read these letters, though?
They put a single eyelash inside one of them.
Seriously, they're really banking on that tiny detail. Did they just stuff all these documents in his pockets?
Actually, they put them in a briefcase and chained it to his wrist. They even carefully looped the chain around his trench coat belt so it looked like he'd secured it during the flight. That way, even if they didn't examine the body closely, they wouldn't miss the briefcase.
They were accounting for every possibility. Okay, so we've got the body, the backstory, the misleading documents, the briefcase. What about the drop site? Why Huelva, Spain?
Remember that German agent they knew was operating in Spain? Adolf Claus?
The one Montagu described as having excellent contacts.
The very same. They were certain he'd get hold of that briefcase and pass the information on.
So how did they get Major Martin to Huelva? They didn't just, chuck him out of a plane.
They used the submarine. HMS Seraph. It was the most discreet way to deliver the body close to shore without raising suspicions.
All right, the submarine is en route. The body is prepped. This is getting intense. What happened next? So the Seraph is hanging out off the coast of Spain. Major Martin is on board, ready to go. This is like a movie. What happened next?
Oh, the submarine journey itself was pretty crazy. They were actually bombed twice on their way to Spain.
Whoa! Twice. They must have been freaking out.
Yeah, talk about pressure. But they finally reached Huelva on April 29th, 1943, and in the early hours of the next morning, they released Major Martin into the sea.
So how did they make it look like, a natural thing?
It had to be convincing, right? They couldn't just toss him overboard. The crew used the submarine's engines to create a current that would push the body towards the shore, make it look like he drifted in naturally. There's even this detail that the submarine's commander, Lieutenant Bill Jewell, read Psalm 39 before they released the body.
Wow, that's a pretty powerful image. Okay, so the body's in the water, now what?
Right on cue, a Spanish fisherman finds the body, contacts the authorities, just like they planned.
And what about the briefcase? Did they find that too?
Oh yeah, they did. Major Martin was given a proper burial with full military honors, but the Spanish authorities held on to the briefcase. And just like the British were hoping, word of this dead British officer and the mysterious briefcase reached a German agent, Adolf Claus.
The one they were hoping would find it. It's all coming together. Did the Spanish authorities examine the briefcase before the Germans got to it?
They did, and just as the British anticipated, they shared what they found with the Germans.
Okay, but finding the briefcase is one thing, believing what's inside is another. How did the British make sure the Germans didn't see through the deception?
This is where it gets really smart. The British sent a bunch of fake diplomatic cables back and forth between the consul in Huelva and his superiors in London. They knew the Germans were listening in, and these cables were all about how urgently they needed to get that briefcase back.
So by making it seem super important, they made the Germans even more interested.
Exactly. The Germans were hooked.
And did they just look at copies of the documents, or did they?
They got their hands on the real deal. Some pro-German Spanish officers opened up the sealed envelopes, photographed the letters, and then carefully resealed everything. They even soaked the letters in salt water so they'd look untouched.
Wow, talk about dedication. So did it work? Did the Germans buy it?
On May 8th, 1943, the information from those letters reached the German High Command. Then, on May 14th, the British got the confirmation they were waiting for. A decoded German message saying that Hitler himself had fallen for the deception. He was convinced the Allies were going to attack Greece and Sardinia.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
They actually diverted German troops away from Sicily.
Completely. And on July 9th, 1943, Allied forces landed in Sicily, and they met much weaker resistance than they expected. The Germans were totally caught off guard.
I bet Hitler wasn't too happy when he realized he'd been tricked.
Let's just say he wasn't thrilled. And this success allowed the Allies to push further into Italy, which ultimately contributed to the downfall of Mussolini.
Wow, talk about a chain reaction. So Operation Mincemeat was a major turning point in the war.
It was. It's considered one of the most successful deception operations ever. But of course, for years, it was top secret.
Right, you can't just go around telling everyone how you tricked Hitler. So when did the story finally come out?
It first emerged in 1950 in a novel called Operation Heartbreak by Duff Cooper, who was a former cabinet minister. But it was Ewen Montagu's own account, The Man Who Never Was, published in 1953, that really spilled the beans.
That makes sense. He was the one who orchestrated it all.
Exactly. And his book became a bestseller. It was even made into a film in 1956. There have been other adaptations over the years, a play, a book by Ben McIntyre, even a recent film in 2021. It's a story that people just can't get enough of.
It's got it all: intrigue, deception, high stakes. But even with all these accounts, there's still debate about the full impact of Operation Mincemeat, right?
Yeah, some historians argue that the Allies might have been successful in Sicily anyway, even without the deception. But the speed and the relatively low casualties suggest that mincemeat played a big role.
And what about Major Martin, or, well, Glyndwr Michael? Did he ever get any recognition?
He did. He's buried in Huelva, Spain, and in 1997, his headstone got an inscription. Glyndwr Michael served as Major William Martin, R.M.
That's a fitting tribute. A pawn in a bigger game, but a crucial one. Okay, we've covered the origins of the plan, the creation of Major Martin, the execution, the aftermath, the legacy. It's an incredible story. What does it all mean? What's the big takeaway here? I mean, it wasn't just about planting fake papers, right? It was about understanding how the Germans thought. They already thought the Allies were going after Greece, so the British just played right into that.
Yeah, the Germans were basically blind to their own assumptions, and the British took advantage of that brilliantly.
It's a crazy mix of planning and psychology. Makes you wonder if anyone's using these kinds of tactics today, with all this information warfare going on.
Oh, for sure. The methods might be different, but the basic ideas of deception and manipulation are still around.
Kind of scary when you think about it.
Oh.
Well, this deep dive has been amazing. Secret memos, wartime deceptions, mysterious bodies, the legacy of this whole operation.
And what gets me is how Operation Mincemeat shows how powerful a good story can be. I mean, even now, it still captures our imaginations and reminds us that truth can be crazier than fiction.
Yeah, it's got intrigue, suspense, high stakes, and in the end, it's a triumph of human ingenuity. But it also makes you think about the ethical side, using someone's remains without their consent.
That's a good point. It's definitely complicated. But even with those moral questions, Operation Mincemeat still shows us the power of creative thinking, those who dared to challenge the norms.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest times, there's still room for human brilliance.
And that sometimes the most unbelievable stories are the ones that really happened.
Well, you've given us a lot to think about. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive into Operation Mincemeat. Until next time.